considered a crypto asset service provider or CASP under MiCA? And if yes, what does it actually mean for your business in 2026? This session is especially relevant if you are building or operating exchanges, wallets, trading platform, token-based products, or infrastructure that touch EU users directly or, what is most interesting, indirectly as well. So I want to start with, I would say, a statement that may sound a bit uncomfortable, but it's accurate. In 2026, a large number of crypto companies will be operating illegally in the European Union, possibly without realizing it. Not because they ignored the law or because they acted in bad faith, but just because they misunderstood what MiCA actually regulates. Most founders still associate MiCA with token issuance, with white paper, stable coins, let's say disclosure rules. But that is only part of the picture because MiCA is not primarily about tokens. MiCA is about businesses in general. It's about how crypto services are delivered, who controls key functions, and how users interact with crypto through your product. And that is where the real risk sits. We can call it in this way. By the end of this webinar, you, I believe, should have clarity on whether MiCA likely applies to your product. Second, an understanding of which specific activities trigger CASP status under MiCA. And third, a clear sense of what decision must be made now to avoid finding yourself locked out of the European market in 2026 and beyond. If you are here because you issue a token, this will still be useful. But if you are here because you do not issue token, this session may be even more important. Because the most exposed teams under MiCA are often the ones who believe they are not regulated one. And right after this point, I want one more time remind you about the way to test these assumptions immediately. On the screen, you see this QR code to a short MiCA self-assessment quiz. It takes us through less than 2 minutes to complete. And this quiz is designed to help you sanity check one core question. Based on your actual product features and activities, are you likely to fall within the MiCA scope as a crypto asset service provider or CASP? The question focuses on, I would say, concrete regulatory triggers, not just labels. What you do for users, how well you move through your product. It's important because MiCA does not regulate intentions or narratives, it regulates activities. And we'll talk about this today. I indeed recommend completing the quiz as soon as possible while the framework is fresh. Your result will give you, I'd say, initial indication of whether you are likely in scope, potentially in scope, or likely outside MiCA. And after the session, you're welcome to share your result with me because it will allow me to translate this high-level outcome, likely in scope, potentially in scope, likely outside scope, into more concrete next step, if any are needed. The thing is that if your company enable users to buy, sell, swap, store, move, route, or execute crypto transaction, MiCA potentially may already apply to you. Even if you have never issued the token, even if you call yourself an infrastructure, that's one of my favorite, or even if you are non-custodial, or even if you are incorporated outside the European Union. Today's session is not a general MiCA overview. It's not theoretical legal lecture. This session is about operational reality. It's designed for founders, for operators, and decision makers who are building or, let's say, scaling their crypto products and need just a clear answer to this one question: are we crypto asset service providers under MiCA? And what does it mean for your business in 2026 and beyond? But before we come to this, let's start by resetting this mental model very quickly. What exactly changed under MiCA and why 2026 is not a distant deadline, but an operational one? The thing is that, as you may know, before MiCA, European crypto market was fragmented. Every member state had its own interpretation of crypto regulation, different licensing regimes, different definition, different enforcement standard. Founders built strategies around this fragmentation. They chose jurisdiction with some lighter rules. They relied on national registration, but MiCA fundamentally ended model. MiCA is a regulation, it's not a directive. Directive allows national implementation choices, but the regulation in the European Union applies directly, uniformly, and identically across all European Union member states. From a legal standpoint, there is no longer French version of MiCA or German version, Lithuanian version. There is only MiCA. This means that regulatory arbitrage inside the European Union is effectively over. You can no longer rely on some softer national interpretation or, let's say, informal regulator guidance. Especially, you can no longer rely on legacy VASP registration, not CASP under MiCA, right? But VASP, virtual asset service provider, which was before. MiCA replaced entire patchwork with one harmonized framework. And it does so with a very clear philosophy, I would say. Crypto is no longer treated as an experimental edge case. It's treated as a regulated market activity. And that shift matters more than any individual article or requirement. Because from regulators' perspective, the question is no longer, is this new? Is this unclear? The question is now, is this authorized or not? This is why 2026 is not about adapting slowly. It's about just binary state, authorized or illegal. And that applies regardless of how long your business has existed, how innovative your product is, or how carefully you avoided issuing that token. The second fundamental shift under MiCA is more subtle, and this is where most teams misjudge their risk. Before MiCA, many regulatory discussion in crypto started with one question: do you issue a token? If the answer was no, founders often assumed they were out of scope. But MiCA breaks that logic completely. MiCA does not start with token. MiCA starts with activities. It does not ask what you call your product. It asks what your business actually does. And this is deliberate design choice. MiCA does not regulate technologies. It regulates services in respect of crypto assets as a direct quote from the regulation. That phrase appears throughout the regulation and it is doing real legal work. Because from a regulatory perspective, a risk does not come from whether you are a wallet, a protocol, a front end, API, SaaS platform, or infrastructure. Risks come from the fact that users rely on you to access, move, exchange, execute, or manage crypto assets. That is why MiCA explicitly separates token issuance from service provision. You can be fully in scope, MiCA scope, without issuing a single token. And you can issue a token without being a CASP if you provide no regulated services. This is where all these labels idea just fail. Because calling your product non-custodial, decentralized, self-hosted, or just infrastructure, which is so popular now, does not automatically remove you from scope. Regulators look at substance. They look at what users can do inside your product, who controls the critical parts of the system, where decision making happens, and where users place their reliance. If your platform enables crypto activity in a way that is operational, commercial, and user facing, MiCA is likely interested. This also explains why disclaimers do not protect you. You can say you are not an exchange, let's say, but if users experience your product as an exchange, that experience matter more than the disclaimers. You can say, you do not provide custody. I don't provide custody, you can say. But if users lose access to their assets when your system goes down, regulators will draw their own conclusions. MiCA is designed to look through narratives, through marketing language. It asks just core question: are you providing a service in respect of crypto assets on a professional basis? Because if the answer is yes, the label, the name you choose just no longer matter. I know this shift is uncomfortable for many teams because it forces an honest look at product design. But it's also, I would say, where clarity begins. To understand MiCA properly, it helped to stop thinking about it as a just one law, one regulation. MiCA is better understood as a three separate rule books living inside one regulation. Each rulebook targets a different source of risk in the crypto market. Each has its own logic, own obligation, and of course, own consequences. If you mix them up, you will almost certainly misjudge your regulatory exposure. So let me briefly map there. The first rulebook, it covers stablecoin issuers. This is the most heavily regulated part of MiCA because stability, yeah, stable coin, the stability creates systematic risk. If you issue a token that is backed, referenced, or designed to remain stable in value, regulators indeed care about reserves, redemption rights, governance, and of course, your financial stability. This regime applies to asset reference tokens and e-money tokens. If you issue anything that feels, walk like stable, this rulebook is just unavoidable. Second rulebook cover issuers of crypto assets other than stable coins. This is where many teams expect MiCA to begin and end, because this regime focus on disclosure, white paper, marketing rule, consumer protection. In general, it's designed to ensure that when tokens are offered to the public or admitted to trading, users receive accurate and non-misleading information. I would say that this rulebook applies even if the token is a token that you issue, your token has no financial right, and it's important to understand because utility does not always mean unregulated. However, and this is critical, neither of these two rulebooks automatically applies just because you operate a crypto business. They apply only if you issue a token. And I would say this is where the biggest misconception appears because the third rulebook exists. And the third rulebook is where most operational crypto business fall. This rulebook governs crypto asset service providers or CASPs, and it operates independently from the other two. MiCA does not assume that token issuance and service provision are the same thing. Legally, they are treated as separate risk categories. This, I would say, leads us to two clarifications that sound simple, but they are quite often misunderstood. First, you can be CASP, yeah, without issuing any token at all. Second, you can issue a token and not be a CASP if you provide no regulated crypto services, because these regimes do not automatically trigger each other. MiCA asks different questions for each. This is why Rule Book 3 is so important. It captures real operational behavior. It applies to exchanges, wallets, trading platform, brokerage models, different on-ramp, off-ramps, and of course, Web3 products with embedded crypto functionality. Most importantly, it applies regardless of whether you issue token. So many teams indeed get surprised from this. They prepare white papers, disclosures, but they do not prepare for licensing, for governance, for operational oversight. And that's a reality, unfortunately, as of now. All right, let's go even deeper now and break down the specific activities that trigger CASP status under MiCA step by step. As we already understood, MiCA does not determine CASP status based on how company describes itself. It determines CASP status based on what the company actually does in practice. This is critical distinction because regulators do not analyze your pitch decks. They analyze product functionality, your operational flow, and of course, user experience. MiCA follows activity-based approach. And the legal question is always the same. Are you providing services in respect of crypto assets on a professional basis? As we already understand, if the answer is yes, CASP regime becomes relevant, regardless of labels, architecture, or even this corporate storytelling. Because many founders, they indeed focus on what they are not doing. That's the interesting thing. They do not issue a token, they do not call themselves an exchange, they do not market custody, but MiCA focus on what users can actually do. That's why in this section, I want to break down these core activities that trigger CASP status, starting from most operationally sensitive one, I would say. The first is custody and administration of crypto assets. Custody under MiCA is interpreted broadly. It covers any arrangements where a provider safeguards crypto asset or cryptographic key on behalf of users. I'll say that classic examples include custodial wallets and, of course, some platform holding assets prior to settlement. But I'd say that custody is not limited to traditional wallet models, because from a regulatory perspective, the key question is dependency. If user would lose access to their crypto assets if your system fail, you're likely providing custody or administration, even if you never formally hold private key. Because this control, it can be technical, it can be contractual, or just operational. MiCA treats custody as a high risk activity, and as a result, it carries stricter organizational safeguarding and, of course, liability requirements. Second activity is the operation of trading platform for crypto assets. This usually applies when a system brings together multiple buying and selling interests and enable transactions to take place. It includes, of course, centralized exchanges, but it also includes hybrid and novel architectures. Whether matching happens on chain or off chain, it's not decisive actually. What matters is whether you operate the system that enable this matching. If user perceive your product as a place where trading happens, regulators are likely to reach to the same conclusion. And at this stage, it's important to note one recurring mistake. Many teams assume that decentralization of execution removes them from scope. But the thing is that under MiCA, that assumption is quite unsafe, I would say. Operating the platform in most of cases just enough. And this intermediary roles trigger regulation even when liquidity or execution are outsourced, like this. The good example is this like next category, which is exchange of crypto assets. Under MiCA, this includes both exchange of crypto assets for funds and exchange of crypto asset for other crypto asset. In practical terms, this covers buying, selling, and swapping functionality. If users can convert value inside your product, MiCA treat that as a regulated activity. And this remains true even when pricing, let's say, sourced externally, or liquidity is provided by a third party, or settlement occurs outside your infrastructure. Because from a regulatory standpoint, what matters is that the exchange function is part of your service offering. Providing access to conversion is just enough. The next activity is execution of orders on behalf of clients. Execution occurs when a provider acts to carry out transactions for users rather than user interacting directly with the market on their own. It may include the situation where for example, platforms submit transactions on behalf of users, or some execution parameters are handled by the system, or let's say execution is automated. There is some predefined logic, and execution is automated through this predefined logic. You do not need to be a final execution venue. But if your system is responsible for carrying out the trade, MiCA is likely to classify that as an execution. Quite closely related is reception and transmission of orders. This applies when a provider receives user order and transmits them to another entity or some venue for execution. This intermediary role is frequently underestimated, I would say, because many teams assume that if another party executes the trade, they are not regulated. But MiCA does not take that view. Acting as a conduit between the user and the execution venue as itself may be considered a regulated service. That is particularly relevant for broker-style application, for some smart order routing system, for trading bots operating through user interfaces, or some platform that abstract away execution complexity. Intermediation create regulator responsibility. I would say the underlying logic here is simple. From user's perspective, you are the service provider. That user reliance is sufficient to trigger CASP obligation in most of cases. And the final group here, final group of activities often surprise teams that believe they're outside regulatory scope. These are placement and advisory services. Under MiCA, placement involves actively promoting or facilitating the distribution of crypto asset on behalf of an issuer. This can include structured launches, some platform-driven distribution, or preferential access mechanism. If your business plays an active role in bringing crypto asset to users, that activity may be regulated, even if the asset is issued by some third party. Advisory services mentioned here are even more frequently underestimated because MiCA captures situation where a provider offers some personalized or behavior shaping, let's call it in this way, guidance in relation to crypto assets. This may include some individualized recommendations, some model portfolio, some signals tied to specific crypto assets, or even some decision support tools that go just beyond neutral information or general information, or let's say some news from crypto world. The regulatory concern is reliant. When users reasonably rely on your guidance in making crypto-related decisions, MiCA expect accountability. And this is particularly relevant for products that combine trading functionality with content, with some analytic or strategy tools. Because at this point, many teams attempt to rely on disclaimers. They state that nothing is financial advice. It's like this. Or they emphasize user responsibility. Like all responsibility, liability, everything on user side. Or they highlight that there is educational intent. I think is that under MiCA, disclaimers do not override substance. If the product design, presentation, or let's say monetization model indicate that users are being guided or influenced in their crypto decisions, regulators will look past the disclaimers. And the same logic applies across all CASP activities. Non-custodial design does not automatically remove custody risk. Some third-party execution does not remove intermediation risk. Decentralized branding does not remove platform operation risk because MiCA consistently apply a substance over form approach. And this leads to one practical conclusion. CASP status is determined by cumulative activities. You do not need to provide all regulated service. Providing just one is sufficient. This is why CASP analysis might be feature-based, not narrative-based. So, as we already understood, for CASP, the main MiCA question is not what you issued, the question is what you provide. So here are some examples, and I would like to talk about them. Let's say wallet provider with no token. If users store crypto in your wallet, rely on your system to access it, or depend on you for transaction execution or recovery, you may be providing custody or administration services. No token is required for this analysis. From MiCA perspective, the risk just comes from user reliance and token economics. Not do anything about it. Example 2, trading app that use third-party liquidity. Many teams believe that using external liquidity providers remove them from scope. It does not. If your app allows users to place orders, execute trade, or swap crypto through your interface, you may be providing exchange or execution services. Even if another entity supplies this liquidity, even if settlement happen elsewhere, outsourcing does not eliminate regulatory responsibility when the service is part of your product offering. And there is example number 3, a web platform with embedded swap. This is increasingly common now. The platform may market itself as content, gaming, or social infrastructure. But if users can swap tokens inside the product, if they can convert value or interact with liquidity without leaving your interface, that feature is a regulated crypto service. MiCA doesn't actually care whether that swap is a small feature or a core business. If it exists, it matters. All right. Now, let's apply this logic in structured founder self-assessment, designed to help you determine whether your product is likely in scope and where the highest regulatory pressure points it. At this point, The question most founders have is very simple. So, what does this mean for us? Not in theory, not in some legal memo, but in practice. MiCA scope analysis does not start with legal definition. It starts with an honest review of how your product actually works. The most reliable way to approach this is to treat MiCA as some sort of diagnostic exercise. I would like you to do this assessment mentally as we go through it. The first question is about structure. Where is your company incorporated? If you are incorporated in the European Union, in most of cases, MiCA is not an option for you. If you provide any crypto asset services, the real question is not whether MiCA applies, but which CASP permission you need. However, if you are incorporated outside the European Union, do not assume safety. MiCA can still apply if your services are offered to European Union users or they have effects in the European Union. This is where many teams make an incorrect assumption. Incorporation location alone does not define your scope. What help you define is the question number 2. Where are your users located? You should ask yourself 2 things. Do you have EU users today? And are EU users able to onboard and use your crypto features in practice? Because formal targeting is not the only relevant factor. If EU users can sign up, access functionality, and transact without any barriers, regulators may treat that as an active offering into the European Union. And here, there is a situation where this accessibility matter the most. All right, the third question is about features. This is the core, of course, for the assessment. Forget marketing language and some product narratives for a moment. Look at your feature list. Can users store crypto in your product? And you should respond realistically. Can they buy, sell, swap, or convert crypto? Can they route orders or execute trades? Can they interact with liquidity without leaving your interface? Because if the answer is yes to any of these, you're likely providing services in respect of crypto asset on professional basis. At this stage, it's important to be precise. You do not need to be doing everything, as we already understood. One regulated activity is enough. This is also the moment where many teams realize that their perceived regulatory position and their actual position are not quite the same. Let's go a bit deeper here. First question, who controls keys, contract, or execution? This is where many teams misinterpret risk. Non-custodial design reduces certain regulatory risk, but it does not eliminate CASP status. Regulators assess control broadly. This includes control over smart contracts that move assets, transaction construction, even execution logic, and of course, operational access, recovery, and system continuity. If user depends on your system to transact or access crypto assets, the dependency is relevant for you, even if users sign transactions themselves. Because many founders rely on this. We don't sign anything. We just interface, infrastructure. My favorite one, infrastructure. All right, fifth question. How is crypto actively monetized? Monetization indicates professional activity. And remember, services related to crypto are unprofessional base. Monetization indicates professional activity, and this include direct transaction fee, spreads of commission, subscription linked to crypto functionality, revenue sharing with third parties, or some, let's say, indirect monetization depending on crypto usage. MiCA applies to service provider on a professional basis. Monetization is a strong indicator of professional activity of this professional basis. Even when fees are not charged per transaction, business model that depends on crypto services typically meets the professional basis threshold. And the last point I would like to mention at this point, two critical conclusions should be clear. First, non-custodial architecture reduces exposure, but it does not automatically remove CASP status. Second, outsourcing does not outsource responsibility. Using third-party liquidity, execution venue, or infrastructure does not remove regulatory obligation if the service is a part of your product offer. From the regulator's perspective, the question remains the same: who is the service provider the user relies on? And this complete the founder self-assessment. If you were able to answer these questions clearly, I think you already have a strong indication of whether MiCA is relevant to your business. But at this stage, it's quite important to address timing. Let's talk about this. We are in early 2026. Oh, MiCA. MiCA is often discussed as a future compliance topic, or at least it has been. In reality, the window for preparation is already closing. MiCA includes transitional regimes that were designed to allow existing market participants to move from national WASP framework, WASP, yes, Virtual Asset Service Provider, to this unified CASP regime, CASP, Crypto Asset Service Providers under MiCA. However, these transitional regimes, they are not uniform and they are not open-ended. Several member states have already shortened or eliminated them. And as a result, by early 2026, many European Union jurisdictions will have no transitional fallbacks at all. In practical terms, this means one thing: if you are providing crypto asset services in those jurisdictions without MiCA authorization, you will be operating illegally. And this is not a gray area. MiCA does not offer a soft landing once transitional period expires. Authorization becomes a binary condition. I already said it, I know. Authorized or not permitted to operate. And this applies regardless of whether your business was compliant under previous national regime. And the reason this matter of well, it's not only legal, I would say it's operational, first of all, because teams that delay MiCA preparation often discover that compliance cannot be added at the end. Late preparation fails for structural reasons, because at some point just product assumption became invalid. Many products are designed around flows that under MiCA require specific permissions or are not licensable in their current form. When this realization come late, teams are focused into rushed redesign, some feature removals or market exits, which of course the bad things to do. Second, corporate structure are frequently misaligned. MiCA authorization requires substance, require governance and control functions that cannot be retrofitted easily. This late stage restructuring introduced delays and introduced some internal friction, and of course, tax complexity. Taxes here, should never forget about them. And third, authorization pathways begin to close. The thing is that as more firms apply for CASP license, regulators become more selective and timelines extend. A team that wait often face longer review periods and reduced flexibility in jurisdiction choice. At the same time, by contrast, early preparation preserve options because early structuring allow team to design compliant product flow, separate regulated and non-regulated activities, choose jurisdictions strategically, and sequence authorization in line with growth plans. This is a difference between late compliance and early structure. Late compliance is reactive, respond to regulatory pressure under time constraints. Early structuring strategic, it's aligned broader legal structure and market access from the outset. The same distinction applies to licensing. Reactive licensing is about catching up. Strategic optionality is about preserving freedom of action. Because MiCA does not eliminate opportunity in the European Union market, but it does require planning. Teams that treat MiCA as a design perimeter rather than obstacle. That's the one that retains speed, credibility, and access in 2026 and beyond. So what if you're in school? At this point, the question change. The question that we ask ourselves. It's no longer a question of whether MiCA applies, are you CASP, total commission, etc. It becomes what MiCA requires in practice. If your business falls within CASP scope, the consequences are structured. They are not just cosmetic here. The first and most visible consequence is, of course, authorization. A CASP must obtain authorization from a competent authority in EU member state before providing crypto asset services. This authorization is not generic, as we already understand. It's activity specific because the exact service you provide, custody, advice, exchange, etc., the exact service you provide determine the scope of your license, the prudential requirement that apply, and the level of supervisory scrutiny that you should expect. Of course, operating without authorization after the relevant transition period, it's not a compliance gap, it's just regulatory breach. It's just illegal. Second consequence, ongoing supervision. Authorization is not the end of the process, it's the beginning of continuous regulatory oversight. CASP are required to implement and maintain defined governance structure, clear allocation of management and control function. Separately, risk management and internal control framework, safeguarding measure for clients' assets, if of course it's applicable to your case. Of course, there are requirements to incident reporting, regulatory disclosure, and ongoing engagement with supervisory authority. This obligation have direct implication for headcount, internal processes, and operating costs. And the third consequence, the impact on product design. MiCA compliance, it's not something that sits on top of the product. It shapes the product. Because CASP status affect which features can be offered to European Union users. How custody, execution, and settlement flows are structured. How tokens are integrated, if they're integrated at all, how revenue models are designed, and how fast the business can scale in the European Union. This is why teams that approach MiCA late, they often struggle. That's just true. They discover that compliance requires changes to core assumption, not just documentation. And of course, there is a first consequence, strategic position. MiCA authorization became a gatekeeper for European Union market. For some teams, this means formalizing operations earlier than planned. For others, it means segmenting users, isolating regulated activity, or sequencing market entry. The key point is this: MiCA does not ask whether compliance is convenient. It asks whether your business model is compatible with regulated operation in the European Union. Understanding this early allows teams to plan, but understanding it late just force team to react. This slide. This slide illustrates one of the most important distinctions under MiCA: strategic compliance versus reactive compliance. You can take a look at this table. The thing is that many teams think that compliance is a single event, but in reality, it's a sequence of decisions made over time. The difference is whether those decisions are made intentionally or just under pressure, under huge pressure. On the left, you see late or reactive compliance. This is what happened when a team responds only after regulators, partners, or banks raise some concern to them. The timing is defensive. Product changes are forced. Corporate structure are retrofitted. And of course, jurisdiction choices are limited because the product already exists. Licensing in this scenario became just catch-up work. Market access is delayed or temporarily blocked. Uh, Cost increase because everything is done in urgency mode. On the right, early structuring and strategic compliance. Here, regulatory constraints are considered from the outset. Product flows are designed to be compliant from day one. Governance and corporate structure are purpose-built, not patched later. Jurisdiction selection becomes a strategic choice, not just a last resort. And authorization follows a planned sequence aligned with product milestones. Market access is preserved and expansion remains possible. An important point here: if you are thinking it is already too late, the market is showing the opposite. Very recently, Binance publicly confirms that it has applied for EU MiCA license in Greece, by the way. This is a company that already operates at scale across multiple jurisdictions with existing regulatory footprint. If even large established players are restructuring and applying now, this just tells us two things. First, MiCA compliance is not theoretical exercise. And second, it's not too late to act, but it does require deliberate decision. So the key takeaway is this: MiCA does not force you to license immediately in every case, but it does require that you make informed design and structuring decision early. This slide is where MiCA stopped being only a legal topic and it started becoming a business strategy. MiCA authorization is often framed as a cost or a burden, but in practice, many teams experience it as leverage. Because first, there is improved access. Authorization change how the market treats you. Banks, payment providers, and infrastructure partners assess risk differently once you operate under MiCA. That often translate into smoother banking relationship, access to payment trade, reliable fiat on-ramping, off-ramping, even fewer sudden account closures. In short, less friction, more predictability. Second is, of course, market expansion. MiCA gives you access to European Union single market through passporting. One authorization in one of European countries, multiple jurisdictions, European Union member states. So instead of rebuilding compliance country by country, you operate under a unified framework. Outside the European Union, MiCA authorization is increasingly seen as a credibility signal. And for many teams, it becomes a foundation for global expansion and just a clear competitive advantage. And of course, third is a stronger partnership. Institutional clients, enterprise customers, and B2B partners now expect regulatory clarity just as a baseline. MiCA authorization shortens due diligence cycles. It increases trust and open door to partnerships that are simply not available to unregulated teams. Is it true? It also enables smoother integration with traditional financial institution, which is of course critical for scale. For the right business model, it is a strategic asset that unlock access, credibility, and growth. However, when the team asks what to do next under MiCA, the answer is not to rush into licensing. The answer is to move through the right step in the right order. And step one is a clear scope assessment. This is the foundation. You start with feature-based analysis of your product, not labels, not positioning, not assumption. You map each function to potential CASP activity. You look at how users interact with the product and where this reliance, execution, or value transfer actually happens. The output of this step should be binary clarity in scope, partial in scope, outside scope. Without this, every later decision is just a guesswork. Step two for jurisdiction selection. MiCA is a regulation, but enforcement and supervisory practice sit with member states. Their timelines, cost, expectation, and substance requirements, they can differ. This decision affect how fast you can move and how much you will spend, of course, and how flexible your structure will be for years. It is one of the most strategic choices in the entire process, I would say. Um, Step three, it's a product flow redesign. Uh, if needed, of course, if needed. Not every product must change. But where regulated functionality exists, it often needs to be isolated sequences or redesign. This can mean, let's say, adjusting custody model or some execution logic or feature rollout so that your products align with your authorization status at each stage. The goal here is not to slow innovation, of course. The goal is to build a licensable product architecture that can scale without any regulatory dead ends. This is where a structured approach becomes relevant. At Legal Notes, we work with crypto and Web3 teams precisely at this intersection. We help founders to assess MiCA applicability before commitments are made, map product features to CASP permissions, select jurisdiction aligned with business strategy, and design operational flow that are licensable from day one. Our role is not to slow things down, it's to prevent structural deal and preserve strategic options. Because MiCA is now a permanent part of European Union crypto landscape, and the team that succeed will be those that integrate regulatory design into business planning early, rather than just reacting under pressure. And before we close, I would like to briefly outline what comes next in this MiCA series. Today's session focused exclusively on crypto asset service providers or CASP. That is only one of three MiCA regimes. We will be continuing this series with two dedicated follow-up sessions. The first will cover token issuance under MiCA, and this session will focus on when token issuance trigger MiCA obligation, what qualifies as a public offer or admission to trading, white paper requirements and key exemption, of course, marketing rules and common pitfalls, and how token design decisions affect regulatory exposure. That session is particularly relevant for teams that already have a token or are considering one as a part of their growth strategy. And the second follow-up session will focus on stablecoins under MiCA. This is the most heavily indeed regulated part of the framework. We will cover the distinction between asset reference tokens and e-money tokens. We'll talk about when token is treated as a regulated stablecoin. We'll talk about reserve, redemption, and governance requirements, and why many projects unintentionally fall into this regime. The sessions are designed to build on 2 days discussion and provide a complete decision-making toolkit across all three MiCA rulebooks that we discussed today. Registration details for the upcoming webinars will be shared shortly. And we will now move to questions. To make this discussion as useful as possible, I encourage you to focus on practical scenarios rather than some abstract interpretation. In particular, questions are most effective when they relate to specific product models. For example, how MiCA applies to your actual feature set rather than just to crypto businesses in general. Let's say non-new team within users, including question on cross-border exposure, accessibility versus targeting. If your question involves some concrete setup, feel free to describe it briefly. I would be happy to answer because this allows for more precise and actionable guidance. With that, I'm happy to take your question. Let me take a look in our chat. All right, I see here is a question. A lot of messages here in chat. Where is the assumption? I'm reading the Anastasia question. If you don't mind, I'll not read it out loud. I will read to understand the question precisely.
Hi, Ilona.
Yes.
Sorry, that question from Sema. Anastasia hasn't asked, but she raised her hand. So Anastasia, if you're still here, please feel free to leave your question. The question is from Sema.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I see there is letter A. Sima. Yes. Yes, I'm looking at your question right now. Where the assumption and place of operation and settlement is outside of the European Union, foreign company to act as a holding company, IP owner and headquarter, where decisions are made, and so is also outside the European Union. General place of operation. All right, I think I understand the question. Um, Short answer, not automatically. I would say that it depends on targeting, not where the entities are incorporated, because MiCA applies extraterritorially. If crypto service assets are provided to persons, to people located in the European Union. So here, for example, holdco, IP owner, and headquarters are outside the European Union. The MSO is outside the European Union. Decision-making settlements and operation are offshore. That's a great start. What matters is where the service is effectively offered and used, not corporate form alone. CASP license under MiCA is generally not required if all, I would say, if all requirements to obtain the license are not met. Let's put it in this way. services are not actively targeted at European Union person. And this active targeting is actually such a shaking ground because some of regulators perceive this active targeting as a even availability opportunity for your users to enter your website, to register on your website, to download your application, to create account in your application or on your website. And if you did not have not intentionally blocked some specific regions, what is called geo-blocking or geofencing, some regulators, if they see that quite a good number of people from specific European country use this application because they can download it, because they can access it. Even this may be perceived as active targeting. What else? No ill-facing marketing, no ill onboarding, no ill sales activities. If you publish on X, oh my God, I don't know, our wallet now available in Germany, please come. It will be this marketing and sales activity that may trigger MiCA. Also, use specific language, specific pricing, specific legal term, specific distribution channels. Let me give example on each of them. Distribution channels. You put a billboard in the center of Paris. It's in French, and your application is available in French as well. And let's say prices for some of your services are available not only in euro, oh my God, I don't know, dollars, euro, anything. There is, let's say, oh my God, what a currency can it be? Uh, Polish zloty, let's say. You target, there is pricing that explore your connections, and there is legal terms. For example, in your term and condition here is if you join from Poland, please know that risk, blah blah blah, some risk liability. There should be no EU fiat rails or use specific payment integration to stay in the safe zone. So clear geo-blocking and compliance control should be in place. The platform should be passively accessible only without EU solicitation. Because this, in such a case, if all of this is organized in this way, this aligns with MiCA concept of reverse solicitation. But this CASP license may be still required if EU users are actively onboarded or encouraged, marketing is EU facing, product is designed for EU usage. So if it's opposite to this, because regulators will look at economic reality, not just at paper structure. And having them or outside the European Union does not by itself avoid CASP status if the MSO performs activities that qualify as crypto asset services for European Union users. There is still potential that MiCA can still apply. I hope I responded to this question. Let me look. I see there is one more comment. Let me take a sip very quickly. If a Cayman registered company provides a communication channel to run an auction between validators and users, that's a good question, Claire. I think, first of all, what we should think about, it's not CASP as a European Union regulation. If your company is registered in Cayman Island, it's important to understand that Cayman Island, it's not unregulated jurisdiction. Yes, I remember there were times when many offshore zones were considered the gray zones in the matter of cryptocurrency regulation. However, Cayman Island already have their own regulations. So I would say assessment should be start from the Cayman Island regulation. If your main activities here can trigger anything in Cayman Island. And as I understand this question related to CASP, because some of parts, I think maybe validators, maybe users, may be located within the European Union. Um, I would say from this, but it's my assumption, just from this description, short answer would be likely no. But only if this architecture and role boundaries are kept very tight. Because one more time, under MiCA, CASP, it's entities that provide this, let's say, regulated crypto asset services as a business. Execution of order, exchange, custody. That's what we were talking. Your descriptions may be tested mainly against this operation of a trading platform or reception and transmission of order. But there is some MiCA distinction. I think it may work in your favor. MiCA is very clear that execution, settlement, or control, it's a decisive factor. So if your Cayman entity never touch funds, never touch root payments, never control smart contract execution, I think then execution remains outside your perimeter. And regarding this order execution, I'd like to give one more comment. This multilateral RFQ model, it's not automatically a trading platform. If users and these validators finalize the transaction independently, if your platform does not determine execution terms, does not enforce matching, and quotes are indicative, or they may be bilateral because MiCA focus mostly on functional control and not some UX resemblance, I would say. So I would say Cayman entity operating with non-custodial, non-executing, non-settling FAQ communication should not be the CASP under MiCA if you even have some new users. However, again, this conclusion, it's architecture depend, not just branding depends. Not so easy to say from short description. I just try to do my best. If you have any other questions, I would be happy to respond. Thank you so much, Alisa, for your nice comments. Let's see if there are any other questions. Thank you so much. Thank you for your question. All right. I think there is no more question. If you're typing some question right now, uh, just send something, I don't know, some dot in the comment, so I understand that I will not move forward and that you are typing. Let's do like this. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we are moving. We are moving. Before we close, I want to bring us back to this practical takeaway. If you are still uncertain whether MiCA applies to your product, or if you want to double check your assumption with a fresh perspective, I encourage you to use our MiCA self-assessment quiz. Yes, you saw it earlier. It takes around 2 minutes to complete. The quiz is designed to just mirror the initial scope analysis we perform internally. It focuses on what your product actually does, not how it is described. For many teams, it helps surface blind spot. For others, it confirms that their current approach is directionally correct, which is good. And once you receive your result, you are welcome to share it with us. That allowed us to translate this general outcome into concrete next steps, if and when that makes sense for you. If nothing else, use it as a final sense check before making structural product decision for 2026. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope this session helped bring clarity and confidence to your makeup planning, and I sure hope to see you at our next session. Have a wonderful rest of the day, all of you. Thank you one more time, and goodbye.